Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wilka Leadership Talks podcast. I am Wilka, I am your host, and today I have a very special guest, Lynn. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Yes, I wouldn't dare to pronounce your last name, so go ahead.
It's a tough one. It's Zwibak with a long
Zwibak. Lynn, welcome, and please, feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lynn Zwibak, lifetime hospitality professional, revenue management enthusiast extraordinaire. Started my career in sales, group sales, made the move to revenue management, and I know we'll talk more about that. And then became an entrepreneur. So I am now the founder and leader of Zwibak Hospitality Solutions, LLC. We've been operating as Zwibak Revenue Management, focusing on revenue management training for non-revenue managers, but we are about to launch Zwibak Commercial Strategy, unleashing your commercial strategy. So we can talk more about that.
Awesome. Wow. Look at you. You're coming launching. I like that. Like, yay.
It's so exciting. Sounds so official.
It really is. I think I get excited just because it's another product that you're launching, but also like another solution to help, hoteliers in this day and age. As we know, it's very challenging for travel and tourism. But I want to ask you, Lynn, like from your career, right? Like from sales and then revenue management, how was that for you? You just get off college and got a hotel job or you just stumbled to the position. Explain more. When did it start?
So I actually studied hospitality in college. I went to the Cornell Hotel School, and I didn't really know what it was. I come from a line of math teachers. But I had a job in a bagel store when I was in high school, and I really enjoyed it. I liked working with the customers. At the time, I liked to cook. The hospitality major beat that out of me. But I thought I might want to become a chef. I'd also taken some business classes in high school, so I was thinking business. And like my mother and I were trying to figure out what that might look like as a career. And we came up short. And my sister was at Cornell. She was a biology major. And she just happened to be telling my mother about one of her friends who was in this thing called the hotel school. And I did a little research, and it sounded great. It sounded perfect for me. And ironically, I knew very little about hotels because we had a motorhome when I was growing up. So I didn't even stay in a hotel for the first time until I was 13. Like I grew up in New Jersey. We drove to California. We drove to Florida. We just drove the thing everywhere. And we park in.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. That's like my dream childhood.
I mean, we had a house, it was just, this was our vacations, but also our mode of travel. So, but I think that's, all my friends were going on vacations and staying in hotels. And so like that appealed to me also. And I have this thing for like big, beautiful buildings. So, hotels themselves, the physical hotels also fascinate me. So I applied and I got in.
Amazing. What was your first property?
The first property I worked at was two, actually. It was the Hilton Washington on Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C., also known as the Hinckley Hilton, because that's where John Hinckley shot Reagan in the 80s, and the Capitol Hilton at 16th and K.
Wow, fantastic. I'm very familiar with both properties because when I moved to DC, I was in that neighborhood near, Adams Morgan, and I worked in a boutique hotel there. So I was always like interested in what's going on at the Hilton. So maybe I can get some overflow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my last hotel too, it was very close, it was on 15K. So I'm very familiar with those properties, beautiful and, excellent brands as well. Um, but I wanted to hear like Lynn, like details from, working in the sales department. How was that, for you? And then I believe you saw some analytical skills and that brought you to revenue management. But I want to, your point of view.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to go into accounting and finance, coming from math teachers and being, kind of that like analytical nerd in high school. And it was my freshman year. I met the corporate director of sales recruitment for Hilton, who was an alum of Cornell, and he kind of mentored me throughout my years there. And kept trying to get me to go to sales. He was like, you have so much personality, you're so outgoing, you should be in sales. So not knowing any better, I was like, okay, right. And sales sounded like money. So like, sure. So when it came time to graduate, I was so fortunate because I built so much trust with him that he asked me where I wanted to live. So my sister had moved to Washington, D.C. I told him Washington, D.C., and he had them create like a management training role for me at Hilton Washington Capitol Hilton, which then transitioned into a sales manager role. And I was really good at it, to toot my own horn, because I'm very like intuitive with people, and I really genuinely enjoy helping people. So I was there for probably about a year. And I mean, talk about trial by fire. Like the Capitol Hilton is like a block away from the White House, really high profile customers. And the Hilton Washington is 1,119 rooms. It's a monster in a good way, but it's big. And like, I was just thrown into it. And I was, turning and burning. And I wanted to really learn how to actually sell. So I moved to another hotel, the Hilton McLean Tyson's Corner, which is now next to, well, it hasn't moved, but now Hilton headquarters is next to it. When I worked there, it was an empty office building. So I worked there and I sold the Smurf market, which was really fun and challenging, being that at the time, it was in the middle of a half-empty office park without a metro. And like there too, like I was just really good at getting to know and like getting personable with these people who are planning their own events. It's coming out of their own pocket. They've never done this before. I'm really patient. But I didn't enjoy it. It felt so draining to me. Turns out, side note, I ended up taking a Myers-Briggs test in grad school, and secretly, I'm an introvert. I'm outgoing, but I'm an introvert. And then it made sense why I was so drained, because in sales, you have to be on all the time. But I found that I was more interested in understanding what business we should take and why, and how to decide what rate to offer, and spending time with our revenue manager than I was in actually like selling. So I made the decision to move to revenue management, and I never looked back.
Wow, that's amazing. And one thing too, what I like, what you say is, well, I was interested in spending time. So you were already training yourself, right? Like trying to get a grasp of that position in revenue management. Because another point that you said here that it really resonates with me is sales people, they need to be on at all times, right? So definitely knowing that, and giving a chance to another position, I think for our listeners and for people that are, interested in getting into revenue management, like again, start from the bottom, right? Get an internship, work your way up, but also focus in doing what you love, what, makes you passionate about it. So now you have been doing actually revenue management. And I believe me and you, though, we met during a HSMAI event in
Yep.
DC, and you were talking about revenue management, right?
Yeah, it was what did I title it? I think it was just revenue management for non-revenue managers.
Yeah.
And the presentation was, I don't know, I think I covered displacement, forecasting. I don't remember, but it was just kind of, I don't want to say basic, but foundational revenue management concepts that I wanted everybody I was working with in a hotel to understand.
Yeah, and that's actually golden, right? Because in the end of the day, too, like you said, the salespeople are out there, they're selling, but you are out there trying to educate, some of our colleagues in the industry during a networking event. And I really think, people should learn as much as they can. So even you're being an introvert, right? Like I think there is no you can't shy away for going after what you want. So tell me like about this decision that you decided to get on your own and found your LLC company.
Sure. So I'm trying to decide where to start. So I did on property and above property revenue management for about 10 years, and then held some other positions. I was with Marriott for most of that, and I moved into a project management role and training and development. And like I said, I come from a line of teachers. I'm a teacher at heart. I love, like, I may be an introvert, but you give me an opportunity to teach somebody something, and I'm all about it. So I wish I could say that I've always been an entrepreneur and this was my dream, but that is not the case at all. It was really due to circumstances. So I'm going to get personal for a moment. The man who I ended up marrying, my husband, Derek, when I met him, I was working with Marriott in a project management role, and he had just been accepted into the U.S. Foreign Service. So that's basically U.S. diplomats abroad. And Marriott wouldn't let me keep my job and work abroad. This was back in 2016. So like working remote wasn't a thing then. So I quit Marriott, and which was a big decision. I moved to Kenya with him, and we lived there. And I worked for a local hotel company and local independent hotel company, and developed revenue management strategy for them. Then we moved to the Philippines, and I worked, I did some consulting there and some teaching. And then we were moving back to Washington, D.C. for an interim time period. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I can't get a job in DC because I know we're only going to be here for a couple of years and then we're going abroad again. And I can't in good conscience start with a company knowing I'm leaving. So I was like, well, maybe I can make a job out of this teaching thing that I love doing. So I started to, what's the word? Like, productize what I've been teaching to people and turn it into actual classes. Around the same time, I also was fortunate to work with HSMAI to write the study guide and rewrite the exam for their certified revenue management analyst certification, which is their student certification. So that was a great entree into entrepreneurship. And then it just grew from there.
Okay, you have to give our listeners later on, like maybe 2 questions on the test. I'm joking.
Well, shameless plug, I do teach a class that is actually the study guide's based on the class, Revenue Management 101 for non-revenue managers. And if you take that class with me, you will be prepared to pass the exam. So I'd love to share that information with your listeners afterwards.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So basically, people can contact you, take the class, learn about revenue management, and if they want to move on forward, they can go ahead and get a certification from HSMAI, correct?
Correct. And like I said, it's geared towards students, because they have a professional certification, also the CRME, but you have to be a revenue manager to take the CRME exam. You have to apply for it. The CRMA, you don't have to be a revenue manager. It's entry level. So I get asked by random people, like, I'm interested in revenue management. How can I learn about it? What can I do? And there's really no revenue management entry class or frankly career path. So I point them towards the CRMA, which is going to teach them the fundamentals of revenue management. I mean, everything from what's a room night to why RevPAR is so important to how to write a star report. So it's great for people interested in revenue management, also people who work with revenue managers, because then they understand what in the world the revenue manager is talking about when they're rattling off all these acronyms and concepts.
Yeah, it's amazing because actually when I was in sales, I remember I had this job in New York City, and the revenue team at the time, they said, Wilka, we don't have those, rates and stipulation for clients. You need to send us a displacement, Excel sheet if you want to, quote before you quoting a client a rate. And that for me, I was like, oh, okay, because I was very green, right? Like just starting in sales, because I come from operations, and I really appreciated that because it's an exposure, but then also you understand the why behind, right?
Yeah.
And it's not less like, oh, I can't offer this because the social group always comes back to town. But if you analyze the history, right, of the market, of the hotel, then you are able to provide a rate. And I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, like revenue management has changed a little bit, right? Since with all of the tools that we have and AI and like I remember the latest, hotel that I was, they had a website that was showing everybody's um, rates in every single channel possible. But for some reason, I don't remember what the reason actually was, that I didn't have access, only my general manager and the revenue person. And I was like, oh, there is a new tool. Like I want to see, because then I can quote, different groups and different rates and get that base business. But what do you think, like that the communication between sales team, operations team, and revenue managers needs to be in your experience?
I mean, as open and as unencumbered as possible. But I think even before that, there needs to be understanding on all sides of what the other departments are doing, not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it and what drives them. Like one of my soapboxes is misaligned incentives. For example, revenue managers are incentivized on maximizing revenue, which could involve, say, overselling the hotel. And the front desk is incentivized on guest satisfaction, which if you walk a guest and then they return the next night, you're probably not going to get a great review. So those are at odds. Sales is incentivized on revenue, but not necessarily the right revenue. I mean, if they put a big group in the wrong dates, they're still hitting their target. Revenue management's not going to be so happy about it. So understanding those things, I mean, I realize we can't change those right away, or that's outside my scope, but understanding that, and then understanding like what drives them personally. Like I know from my days in sales, I wanted the glory. I wanted the big group that was going to fit the need time. I wanted the big contract. I wanted to ring that bell in the sales office and never French here for me. And like, you know what I'm talking about, right?
I know what you're talking about.
And like, as a revenue manager, when I'm speaking to salespeople, I need to remember that yes, we're all in this for the good of the hotel and we all have the same goals and blah, blah, blah. But that's not the reality. The reality is people have their own motives. And the more you can understand each other, and then understand their terminology and their lingo and their process and what they're doing. And, if I could explain to operations how I did the forecast, they might be a little bit more forgiving of me when reality doesn't match the forecast, because they would see, how much detail I put into coming up with the most, I hate this term, but accurate forecast possible. And I hate it because you can't have an accurate forecast. Like, it can only be, you can only measure accuracy in hindsight. But they would also just see how much unknown there is and uncertainty, and how hard it is to be correct often all the time. So I think there's understanding, and then trust, a level of trust, and then being open. Like, I've been in situations where departments are hiding things from each other because, they're afraid that a little bit of information is going to make this department do this, which they don't want them to do. Like, no, that doesn't help anybody. And it just breeds distrust. And like, no, we're literally all on the same team. We may have different goals, but we all want the hotel to be successful.
And actually, Lynn, you got into a point where I love to discuss, because the other day I was talking to a client, a hotel person, and they said, "Oh, my goal is to maximize, revenue." And I'm like, "Okay, but let me ask you a question. How are you replacing, right, those groups, government groups in DC that are being canceled?"
Mm-hmm.
So the person just said, "Oh, that's not my job. That's sales." So for me, when I heard that, I was like, "Oh man, that hurts," because sales is my background, right? And I know sometimes when we had a goal to, hey, you have so many goals also, right? Like in different departments and segments. Oh, you have to have a base LNR. Okay. Oh, well, you have to have a group-based business, but you're not a group hotel. So, there were so many different situations, but I love what you said, understanding and being open to discuss with every department goal, because in the end of the day, the hotel team, they are in the same team, right? And hiding information is not going to help anybody, especially when the end of the year, right? If the hotel got to meet the goals, everybody gets bonus, right? Everybody gets, owners are happy, right? With you guys did a good job. But then also, I think until you get to that, like you said, the forecasting. Honestly, I worked for a hotel that we were doing weekly forecasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got to ask the revenue manager why we were doing that. Right. And
operations, staffing, purchasing.
Yeah. So then I got to, learn about the expense of the hotel, right? So, and then I was like, so funny, because how come in my other properties, I was never involved with budget and what we are spending in, I don't know, client appreciation or, different things, right? That each department has. So for me, that was a very good experience, very good learning experience, because I got to see the why behind, the forecasting and the reason why we are doing that weekly. But also I wanted to, from your lens, as we worked on property, worked on a project management, what is the most challenging, if you may say, between, communicating the goals to the sales team, and making sure they are in synergy? Like, what is the most challenging thing between, those goals?
Yeah. Well, the fact that they don't align is a problem. The fact that each salesperson I know some sales incentives include a component of the total hotel performance, but I know when I was in sales, I kind of resented that, because I did not see how much I impacted the total hotel performance, which sounds silly, because obviously I know that I'm bringing business into the hotel, but from my perspective, there were so many other things going on that I had no control over that I didn't think was fair to hold me accountable for them. So from their perspective, like for the most part, their goal is based on them and what they book. And like I said earlier, they can book a really big group in a really bad time or a really bad group that is going to help their goal and not help the hotel. So when you're explaining to a salesperson why you're not going to approve a certain piece of business, it's hard for them to understand. And I'm not saying that salespeople are selfish. I'm just saying it's just a lack of education for them of like how they actually do impact the total. I mean, a poorly placed group can ruin like several weeks because, sorry, it's not just, it's not just what else you could have taken over those days, but are you preventing a longer stay? Are you preventing a repeat group? Are you preventing a group with the same number of rooms that would have had 3 times as much food and beverage? Like there's so many other, or is it really difficult operationally and therefore you can't book any other groups in over those days? So it's hard to say no to people when you know that they don't have necessarily the full picture of why you're saying no.
And I really, I appreciate this because really it is a problem, I think, in the industry, because also when you don't align everybody's goals, then you have all of these, oh, but I'm working so hard. Like I remember once I had a conversation on the weekly call, right, with the revenue person, and I said, but every group that I send, every displacement analysis I send you, you decline. So what's going on here? So, I like to ask questions, but then at the same time, being the only women on the call or, the only Latina on the call, or, I oftentimes was like, think twice before I ask that question because I don't want to sound stupid, right, in front of this man. So I think like, having the audacity to ask the questions when you don't understand the why behind and you're doing your best to bring those business is definitely essential. Do you think that nowadays, from the people that you're teaching or from your experience, people are more vocal about, revenue management and understanding the why behind, certain goals?
I think so. I think there's, at least from, no, I'm not going to say at least from, yes, there's more awareness. I mean, revenue management has just become so much more front and center than it was 20 years ago when I was in sales, that it's now leading the conversation rather than kind of being that afterthought. So there's more awareness that it's a factor. They also have an equal seat at the table now. And in some cases they have, official veto authority over particular groups. So from my conversations with people, like everyone I've spoken to knows that it's a problem, this lack of understanding on all sides, but nobody really knows what to do with it because like the two groups, sales and revenue, just kind of naturally speak different languages. And it's hard to communicate when you don't speak the same, and I'm air quoting here, the same language. Like, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think your solution and having like also the commercial strategy behind, it's one of approaches that people can take as well, because in the end of the day, like you said, if you don't know the basics of revenue management and like even forecasting, right, per se, and how are you going to understand what is coming into your hotel? And that for me, really, and I swear I had many great general managers, right? Like working on a day-to-day basis. But back then they were not even before COVID actually, right? Like they were not interested in sitting down and explaining to somebody in sales, or even like in my own sales team. I had a lady, I remember, she said, oh, this is my group and my contact. But like if she wins the group, me as a director of sales, I'm winning too. So it's
Right.
like we all have to work together. And if you shine, I shine, right? And like you can be the revenue manager of the year for that corporation, but who is there to say that the sales manager or the director of sales is not also a big piece of that win? So it's definitely, for me, it's always about how we are all shining, how are we all looking good, not for an award, but also for ourselves, so we can plan and do a little better in the following year in our own goals, right? Because it's definitely, something that I love to have. And maybe this is a discussion we can have. We can invite some salespeople too in the future, and bringing your own lane, because it's definitely it's a subject that is passionate about from operation standpoint, revenue management, and sales. But for today, I wanted to actually ask you, because I also have, you know I see that you have this international experience and different cultures, and like when you worked for that independent hotel group in Kenya, was the approach different? You know? And what is the highlight of that experience in your career?
I'm laughing because it was so different, and I was so ignorant how different it was that, like, I can't even conceive of how different it was, right? Even with what I'm going to share. So revenue management has not really reached the continent or Africa, the African continent. Well, at least when was I there, like 8 years ago? The whole concept of saying no to business, that to saying no to somebody, and part of it is they're very polite and respectful, and if you have something and somebody wants it and you can give it, like the idea of not giving it is foreign. um and and then, like, treating people differently, like, why would I give that room to this person over this person? And well, the fact that that person's staying longer, that doesn't matter because this other person asked me first, or but we don't have anybody else who wants that room. And the fact that I know that there's going to be somebody who wants that room for longer, doesn't, like, it just, it's just not a concept that exists in their frame of reference. But the example I like to give that's sort of related to revenue management is this idea of asking for payment. So they think it's rude to ask people for money, for payment, for services or products. So you can sit in a restaurant for hours and they'll never bring you the check unless you specifically have to ask for it. And I found that in Asia when I lived in the Philippines, and here in El Salvador where I live now. I bought food at a food court, and I went to pay the gentleman before taking the food away, and he's like, no, you can pay after. And I was like, but I'm gonna forget. I want to pay you now, and he wouldn't take the money from me. So even like this concept of taking deposits or credit card guarantees was like just to convince the reservations team that was acceptable. And we were located about a block from the U.S. Embassy, so a lot of our business was from there. And I was trying to explain to them, like, Americans worry when you don't take a credit card guarantee from them. They worry they don't have a reservation. So you're doing them a disservice by not taking a guarantee. So, like, all of these layers were going on, and then to try to implement this overarching strategy when just these basic building blocks that we all take for granted. I don't know why my watch is going off. That we just take for granted as part of our society, and then revenue management grew on top of that. That was a challenge. It was a challenge. It was fun, but it was hard. And I have to say, like, I wasn't nearly as successful as I would have liked to have been, because there are certain things you just can't change culturally.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I think for me, I have a similar experience in Brazil, because when I worked before coming to the States, and it's so interesting, like everybody's like looking to get some type of financing a trip, right? Or installment. And I was like, that's like, again, 20 years ago too. And people were like, what? There's no way to finance this international trip? That's unheard of, right? So it's
Right.
like you have to really adapt on what the market and the culture is telling you.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing, that experience. But in today's market, I wanted to ask, because, again, this is a definitely challenging times for hospitality, but I think also it's in, challenging for the world, right? For people to travel and so forth. What do you see, the trends of remaining of 2015 in travel? Your personal opinion completely.
Yeah, that's so hard. I think people are reluctant to travel to the US from outside of the country. I mean, I definitely see that. I have a different perspective because I don't live in the US right now. I live in El Salvador. So, and in El Salvador, the dream is to go to the US, and the barriers are A, the finances, and B, the visa. But as I talk to people and they express their desire to go to the US, I also hear concern, because things from the outside, I mean, and I know from the inside, but things from the outside appear unstable and tumultuous. And, coming from a country like El Salvador that has very tumultuous history, but is now lovely and super safe, by the way, excellent place to visit. I see why that would be a concern for them. But I mean, the hotels that I work with, they're chugging along. Like, I don't see, I mean, it's not like 2001 or 2008, or God forbid, COVID. Like, it's not like this sudden drop off. It's just this general hesitancy that permeates the discussion.
Yeah, it's like I remember back when I lived in New York, and I had actually I worked in a different segment with student housing, and some students, when you were talking about, oh yeah, I have this accommodation in Brooklyn or Queens or the Bronx. So back then, this is like 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, they were like, oh, Brooklyn, what is that? No.
Yeah.
I want to stay in Manhattan. And then I had this example of this student, and I said, it's not every New Yorker that lives in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And the transportation is so simple when you get to the subway. There is places in Long Island City, for example, you can be in Times Square in 15 minutes. So, it's just like educating people on what is there. I think it's essential, but also, you have the inside, right, like of what is actually happening in the US. So it's more like, don't believe everything you hear or see on the internet, and really explore for yourself, because in the end of the day, your experience can be very different than mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? when you come with and see places and visit cities through your own eyes. So I really, I think for me that it has been my motto since, I've lived in different places in the United States, but also when I travel abroad, and especially, a few years back, I was traveling, doing the solo travel,
Mm.
and I've been super successful because, I go with open eyes, open mind. I think
Mhm.
that's what also, we are missing sometimes. But Lynn, I know we are at time, and I wanted to complete, have this conversation with you further. So probably you're gonna see another invitation from me, and maybe we have a discussion with a salesperson.
I would love to. If I
Yeah.
may, though, I just want to jump in and kind of close that loop on the commercial strategy aspect.
Yes.
Um, so, because I did tease it in the beginning that we'll be launching Zwibak commercial strategy, and it's actually already in effect. I just haven't, I'm just finalizing the website, doing the official launch. But basically, what I realized from doing the training of the non-revenue managers was you can train people until you're blue in the face, but if the structures and support aren't there, nothing's going to change. So I realized that not just beyond educating, I needed to dig into the actual hotels. And this came about because several of my students approached me and asked me to work with their hotels, and figure out exactly where the frictions are, because every situation's different. Figure out the frictions, figure out what's working, what's not working, what can work better, and then figure out, and then layer in the education on top of like process improvement and et cetera. So that's what Zwibak commercial strategy is going to do. It's going to help the commercial strategy team work together better, not just through education, but also through processes, through communication, through support structure, et cetera.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you so much, Lynn. And how can people can be in touch with you?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's LYNN and my last name ZWIBAK. You can go to www.zwibak.com, or you can just Google me and you'll find some of the articles I've written about my experience in hospitality, my experiences abroad, and other publications of mine.
Excellent. Thank you so much again, Lynn, for being here today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great one.
Thank you. Bye.